Merciful God, we can get this over with. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky angle where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I am finally talking about the kinda sorta new album from Savant, Jester. Savant is the main alias for Alexander Winter, a Norwegian dubstep/complextro artist. I've gotten tons of requests to talk about this guy, and in particular do a series on the guy's entire discography. I don't know if I want to do that. Now see, I'd known about the guy since his Invasion album dropped 2 years ago, but I never really looked into him, and there was one big reason for that. This guy's discography is freaking huge. This one I'm going to talk about today is his 13th album to date, and that's just including his main studio albums under the Savant name, and doesn't include aliases or EPs or any of that. I mean, artists like Erasure and Depeche Mode have really freaking long discographies, but they've been around since the 80s. This guy's only been doing this since, like, 2011. It's 6 years, and he's already got this much output. I mean, I also have a lot of music under my own name. Like, I also separate the ones that I consider my best as main albums, so anyone hoping to look into my stuff won't find my catalog so daunting, but that's just how I do things, you know, whatever. And another thing about these Savant albums, most of these are really freaking long. A lot have like 16, 18 tracks with no interludes or non-fleshed out material, and I hadn't heard a lick of it aside from his guest appearance on a recent Infected Mushroom album, which made me worried this was going to be another one of those guys that was not going to give me a break and tire me out over the course of all these albums. So yeah, needless to say, I was more than a little intimidated by the size of this dude's back catalog. And I do make it a point to listen to any artist's back catalog before I get into a new release of theirs. So that's why it's taken this freaking long to get to the guy. I mean, initially there was a part of me that said, well, he made it through Infected Mushroom's back catalog without getting bored, you can make it through Savant. So I decided not to put him off for any longer, and after several months of slowly making it through this back catalog, here's my thoughts on his discography so far. Just the main studio albums, by the way. If I miss anything, too bad. This guy is way too much as it is. Okay, so this is basically if Skrillex started to focus on the stuff that I actually really like about him. You get good melodies, random dubstep, electro house, messing around. Actually, it's called complextro, but whatever. It's with some occasional video game soundtrack influences sprinkled around as well. It's fun and all, but by the same token, if this dude doesn't change things up a little more often, I can see this getting old pretty fast. This was a little samey until the last track, Omni. Not super impressed, but we'll see how things turn out. This is more the same. I think I like this one a little more though. A bit more interesting, some more melodic tracks, some more aggressive ones. Pretty solid. Maybe even kinda reminds me of Zircon in some areas, but I'm sorry, this album ran way too long for me. Needed a break halfway through and had a migraine by the end. Could have probably cut like 8 tracks from this thing. Not a great sign. This album is very similar to Vario and suffers from a lot of the same issues. Definitely could have been edited down as well, but actually this one is not quite as in dire need of it. Maybe could have cut like 3 or something. Much more enjoyable as a whole, bit more variety. Thumbs up on this one. This was overall one of my favorites from the guy. I can appreciate the dude cut it down to just 13 tracks this time. There's some good standouts here and there, but stylistically, so far nothing has really changed, and it doesn't look like he's going to anytime soon. Much as I hope he does. Oh, for fuck's sake, this album is almost as long as These Hopeful Machines. It seems he added a bit of hip-hop influence, courtesy of Donnie Goines and others, but otherwise, once again, not that much new. And once again, not great all the way through, and does not deserve to be an hour and 45 minutes, Jesus Christ. I actually almost fell asleep when listening to this, if you would believe that. But once again, there are plenty of standout tracks too, and there weren't any tracks I straight didn't like. It's not bad at all, just way too long. Whoa, only 48 minutes? What this one has of some interest is some metal influences. Was he doing that before? I can't keep track. I can't keep track of all this stuff. Also a cool Monolith-esque intro, which is a nice touch too. There's a straight techno track on here. Ace is sleeved, and there's also a Wade in the Water, which is fucking terrible. Probably the worst track I've ever heard from this dude. And the best part of that track is just he straight samples the drop from Rage Valley by Knife Party. But otherwise, this album's just everything you've come to expect. At least it's short. Oh cool, another short one. Other than that, no surprises here. Moving on. An hour and a half, oh fuck off. Well, this one at least has a couple of tracks that I believe feature the guy's own singing. I very much appreciate the continuous mix. I'm detecting from the Bandcamp description that he was aiming for something sort of conceptual with this one, telling the story of how he got this far, and while it's pretty good, fun all the way through, and surprisingly justifies its length pretty well, there's also nothing on here you could have gotten from a previous album as well. Oh, and speaking of this guy's own singing, this album specifically focuses on that, like only 3 or 4 songs without it. I'm not super taken by his voice. He sounds like some overexcited teenager, and I got really sick of it by the end. And you still could have easily cut this down to under an hour, but I'm glad this album steps away from the usual formulas anyway. I was told there was going to be a lot of Middle Eastern and other world music influences on this one to set it apart from the usual, though I was initially pretty frustrated to hear it took like 5 songs for the different sound to show up. That being said, while this is probably one album of his that I can see myself actually returning to in the future, it's pretty good. Another 100-minute one, yeah. Was kind of optimistic for this one since it was the first one I'd heard about, and it did not contain many surprises, but there were a couple. I mean, I like the track Innocence. It's got this jazzy feel, kind of sounds like a remix of a Herb Alpert track. And also Broken, which kind of went all over the place, but stayed pretty down-tempo for the most part. But by the same token, you also got stuff like Pizza Power Alien, which is nowhere near as cool as it sounds, and Trap Slut, which was exactly as good as it sounded. Yeah, stuff like that really weighs this one down, as per usual. Just needed editing. Some people were hinting that Savant was making a down-tempo album with this one, and I thought, oh yeah, sure, down-tempo with like 8 dubstep tracks thrown in, right? But actually, no. While I think it'd still be a stretch to call this album down-tempo, it's not that far a cry from Savant's usual style, and it's still pretty up-tempo and energetic as usual. But there are more than a few actual down-tempo tracks on here, and somehow not a single one of these tracks follows the typical aggressive dubstep formula he usually does to the letter. I mean, sure, some come close, but still. I cannot tell you how happy I am to hear an album like this out of this guy. Thank you for this, dude. Which brings us to here, and oh my fucking god, am I glad this is all over and done with. Savant's back catalog is by far the most difficult one I've ever done. I just started going through his catalog around the time this album came out, actually, in April, and only just finished it all. Like, Gabriel Lamar may have taken me 3 years to get through, but I marathoned him in like 3 weeks total, and I mean, there was a lot more variety in his back catalog. Yeah, guys, Savant is a guy that I really wish I liked more than I actually do. I mean, I definitely respect him. He very obviously puts a lot of time and effort into every single track, and his typical style is pretty complex. And on top of that, he basically focuses, like I said, on all the qualities of Skrillex's music that I like without any of the embarrassing ones. But this guy's back catalog is way beyond the point anyone can get into him easily for the first time. Way too many albums, and way too many of them way too freaking long. I wish I'd gotten into this guy back in the days when he was still breaking out, or back when I was personally more interested in the modern dubstep scene in general. I mean, I can still enjoy it, but, you know, I don't exactly pop on Skrillex and Knife Party with a ton of regularity these days. I can see myself returning to some of these albums, like, I like Overworld, Zion, and Vibes were the big 3 for me. And I guess Alchemist, Oracle, and Invasion were alright too. In fact, ironically, I think his worst were also some of his shorter ones, like the debut, or Overkill, or Cult, because despite being shorter, they were mostly forgettable and didn't have much of anything that stood out. With the longer ones, the issue of, dude, can't you edit these down more, becomes a lot more prevalent, but they do tend to be more interesting and have more good tracks. I think if you're going into them for the first time, maybe going chronologically might not be the best idea, since most of his stuff up through, I'd say, Cult, kinda run together, at least for me, and it becomes pretty tedious and samey. Even if a lot of these just individually work perfectly fine. That's why I had to space these out over the course of 3 months. I mean, every one of these albums has a whole bunch of people calling it their favorite, so I don't know what to tell you. So that finally brings us to this most recent album, Jester. I didn't have soaring expectations for this one, even if I have been a bit more impressed on average with Savant's more recent output. One upside was that this album was only about an hour. Pretty concise by Savant standards. Though, like I said, the shorter albums of his ironically haven't been among his better ones so far, but I don't know. I didn't really expect anything particularly out of his comfort zone, that was for sure. But I jumped in regardless. How'd it turn out? Well, it wasn't really anything I didn't expect, but yeah, I thought those was pretty good. Amazing? No, but fairly solid. There are some tracks which are good, and some tracks which are not as good. So, okay, first of all, I'm just gonna have to come out and say the opener on this album, Once Upon a Time, was freaking amazing. Undoubtedly my favorite track on the album. Savant may have done the whole MIDI orchestra thing before, but I don't remember if he's devoted an entire track to it in the same way he did here. He probably did, and I just forgot, but whatever. But, like, it sounds like something in between the soundtracks to, like, Wario Land Shake It, Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess, and then you add in a little bit of, like, Genesis by Pendulum in there. Like, he even brought on this, like, sort of, opera-y singing solo, and it really grabbed my attention. Great opener there. But of course after that we get a whole bunch of tracks in a row that I was like, yeah, they're fun and energetic and have nice melodies, but I feel like I've heard a gazillion Savant tracks that sound similar. You got Villain, Jester, Bubbles, Rex. These just didn't really stick out to me. Well, okay, Villain stuck out a little. Like, I do like his use of the MIDI orchestra here too, though there was one drop on this one halfway through the track that was just awful and eye-roll inducing. Legend, I guess, is noticeable for its bouncier beat and funkier feel, though, I mean, he's done plenty of tracks like this before, and the sample where some announcer talks about an actor being typecast into doing the same stuff over and over, I was thinking, wait, is Savant using this sample to describe himself? If this guy really thinks he's being typecast, I have no idea who would say that. I mean, he is actually a pretty diverse producer, but, I mean, if he is, nobody's forcing him to make the same kinds of music all the time. Or maybe the sample just has nothing to do with anything and I'm looking into deeply, who knows. Whatever, that song's alright. Then there's Ritual, which I'm also kinda on the fence over. I mean, it's mainly based around, like, a pitch-shifted choir. Which, you know, gives the track a sense of atmosphere, but I can't help but think this track would probably be a lot cooler if the choir weren't so obviously pitch-shifted up. And then there was Cake, which had me thinking like, oh jeez, he named the song Cake. This cannot be good. But actually this one was really good. It was another one of those funk-influenced ones, and it all came together in a surprisingly fun manner. Really enjoyed that one. Surprise, that one was alright. Another more energetic house track with pitch-shifted vocal snippets from someone named Gaia. Although the track itself was not really a surprise to me. Fantastique, meanwhile, brought in some metal elements. And it was cool, though, again, I've heard him do this kind of thing before. The last couple of tracks on this album, though, are definitely some of the strongest. Tricks had some really great melodies, some quieter moments, especially like the piano section, but also some solid energetic moments too, and it was a really nice listen. Could do without the gang vocals, but, you know, whatever, nitpicking. That was definitely a standout for me. I also really liked Horde. And to be honest, I didn't really expect to, given how I don't typically care for the guy's more aggressive material, or much of anything in this particular mold. Like, see my thoughts on Yellow Claw, and in particular tracks there's like Hold On To Me. But no, I actually did quite like this one. The drop was not a buzzkill. It perfectly kept up with the energy of the rest of the track, and it all came together pretty well. So yeah, thumbs up on that one. But I'll tell you, there was one track here which genuinely surprised me on this album, and I don't mean like I wasn't expecting to like this, I mean like I wasn't expecting Savant to make a track like this. And that was sweet. It is totally like this abstract ambient kind of thing. It goes all over the place and is really odd and free-flowing. Almost feels like Savant was maybe taking some cues from, like, the future sound of London or the Orb or something. Like, you know, he doesn't sound exactly like them or anything, but, I mean, I did not expect anything along these lines, or to mention those artists in a review like this, so, you know, I was definitely pleased to hear something like this. And the last track at the end, I feel like, yeah, it's bookending Once Upon a Time, and it works, though it didn't leave as much of an impression as that track did, so yeah, I guess that's about it. If there's any other comments I might have, it might be, like, I listened to a continuous mix of this album, and I believe this actually came from his official YouTube channel. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost certain it was his official channel, but so I can actually, you know, pick this apart and present this as a legit criticism. This mix, while not bad for the most part, he definitely has some sloppy moments where he stopped a few beats early and it sounds off. Like he stopped the track itself on an offbeat, which wouldn't sound bad out of context, but then he just started the next track right on that offbeat, and then it just sounds off. Like, just throws you off. Like, if he'd let it going for a few more beats, or just, you know, left a tiny little silence in between to make sure that, like, the track is stopped and you're not just interrupt. You want to make sure you don't do that. Would have sounded more natural if he just waited a couple of beats or something like that, but I mean, yeah, it was only like one or two flub transitions, and the rest were fine. But you know, I do have to call attention to this. Stuff like this does bother me, and especially since this is supposedly coming from the guy himself. I'd expect better out of a higher profile artist than, you know, screw up transitions like that. But whatever. The main album on Bandcamp has the tracks separated, they're not in a mix, so this might not be a problem for everyone. And now, the question is, do I see myself returning to Jester? I don't know. I mean, I did like what I heard. I wouldn't say there's any straight bad tracks on this one, but the fact remains that this guy's back catalog was such a chore to get through that it's kind of tough for me to say. And the reason this is a problem is because, like, he just has several other albums that sound fairly similar to this one. Jester was not a major standout for me in his back catalog. It just sounded like another typical Savant album. It's not his worst, it's not his best, it's somewhere in the middle. It does have the benefit of being the only Savant album I've heard more than once as of right now, but I don't know if I really see myself coming back to it that much. But as for whether I recommend it, well, if you're already a Savant fan and have enjoyed all his other work so far, you'll probably have no problem enjoying this. Oh, I have a feeling, given the fact it's been 3 months since the album drops, you probably already have been enjoying this perfectly fine. And for people who've never heard anything from Savant, I guess this wouldn't be a bad place to start either. You get a pretty good idea what this guy's all about, and you could work backwards from there too. No, I really can't tell you where to start. I don't know where. I don't think where I started was the best place to start, but I guess you can ask someone else about that. But for this particular album, it's pretty good. I guess I would say 7.3 out of 10. But of course, this is all just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.